Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for clinging on to the end and staying with us. We will try and liven this up a bit, I think, given that we're the last session and we're sitting between you and a drink. So tonight we've been asked to speak about how we might build innovation in cities through human ecosystems. So a lot of big words and big topics. And we're going to try and get down to some real examples and hear about how it really works from our two speakers who do this every day. But first, it'd be really good to get a sort of sense of who are you guys in the audience? Like, can you raise your hands if you work in a sort of innovation space or in a particular creative hub or network or anything like that? Okay, so not that many. And the rest of you, are you artists? Academics? Just looking for somewhere to sit? Okay, thank you. No, it's really helpful for us to have a sense of like who you are and what you're interested in. So when we're thinking about how we might make new ideas come together, how we foster collaborations across unlikely disciplines and with unlikely cultures, we have to recognize that this isn't always easy. I come from the UK, and I wanted just to start with thinking of Manchester. This is a very old picture of the Hacienda, people dancing to happy hardcore. This is obviously a long time ago, so I'm not trying to be nostalgic. But I think Manchester is a really interesting example of what has been and what continues to be quite a sort of crazy, inventive city with loads of street culture, loads of different cultures. It's the most culturally diverse city in the world for its size, with over 150 languages spoken. And it has all of this stuff rubbing up against each other, sometimes in quite uneasy ways. And I think the challenge for all of us today in the world, there are much bigger examples of what's happened in Manchester and many places every day, is figuring out how do we learn to live with each other? How do we manage to join up those dots and find the best ideas from different people? And how we embrace the diversity, because, it's been proven that innovation flourishes when people from different disciplines and backgrounds come together. But that process and finding the right spaces to do that isn't always easy. And one of the things from my work at the British Council that we've been very interested in is trying to better understand the processes and the spaces that allow that to happen. And we work with a lot of those spaces and people and collaborate with them and learn from them. And for an institution like the British Council, that's a really amazing and important part of our work. This is a map that was done by the Anansi group of innovation spaces. It's a wiki, so you can put up different spaces. If you know of any, feel free to add some more. But there are thousands on here all over the world, and a whole range of sort of codifying what these spaces might be, from a cluster to a gallery to a festival. In my team's work, we look particularly at this kind of nexus between art and technology, and are thinking about creative hubs. So not just the very sort of tech-driven or process or sort of product-driven, but the ones where there is also room for experimentation, very grassroots spaces, and virtual spaces as well, not just physical ones. And we might talk about that a bit more in the future. And I wanted to, that's some facts about what we do. We really do like hubs. We work with them a lot, hundreds all over the world. I wanted to just give a quick story about one in particular called Life Patch. So Life Patch is an amazing group in Indonesia, in Yogyakarta. It's a citizen initiative in art, science, and technology, and it brings together artists, coders, biohackers, scientists, engineers, and citizens. And it tries to work with them in different ways. And the founder, Andreas, used to walk along this river every day, and there was loads of pollution, loads of wastes. Kids were getting sick quite often. And he, with his team of people, worked with local citizens to start mapping using 360 technology and storytelling and sort of testing the water pollution levels and helping to raise greater awareness from the public in how they might address some of the challenges that were coming with it. Through our work with hubs, we try and share some of the learnings that we have from them. They are often quite fragile spaces because they're doing new things. So by definition, they're not established. And we try and share some of those learnings through these resources. So we've got like a hub toolkit that was made by hubs in different places. We've got sort of business toolkits. Got a sort of introduction to hacks. These are not intended to be blueprints in any way. They're just some principles and advice from people who are actually doing this. And for us, for our organisation, we're also trying to help policymakers better understand how they can support them. And then we've also got a whole set of resources about digital art in particular. Okay, I think that's enough from me. I wanted to hand over to you now to hear more about what you've been doing at Atelier. And we've had the pleasure of working together on a few projects. So over to you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Sorry, I wasn't sure whether this was going to render. So given the rather intimate audience, we decided to keep the presentation part short so that we can do more of a Q&A and also getting questions from you. I'm Engin, I'm from Istanbul, Turkey. I'm one of the founders of Atelier, which is a creativity hub and a design studio, strategic design studio in Istanbul. We've been working on this project for about 4 years. My background is in architecture and engineering. I worked in green buildings industry for about 4 years in the US and the UK. And then I did an interaction design degree, which made me realize that smaller scale projects were actually, could actually have a high impact, but these projects needed the right space and environment to flourish. Sorry, I don't know why this is in autoplay mode. So, maybe I just need to stop play button. This is responding very slowly. I'm sorry. So with Atelier, which stands for workshop or atelier in French, we... Apologies for this. Well, I'll just do it full screen and do it the old-fashioned way. Okay. So over the 4 years, we've learned 4 insights that I think is worth sharing. The first one is that most creative hubs face this chicken or egg challenge of if you don't have the space, you cannot easily catalyze the community. But if you have the space and you haven't found the perfect fit, then it's also already too late to shuffle and change your plan. So in our journey, we actually spent a considerable time, about 2 years, where we decided not to have a space and to have a lot of workshops, events, pop-up gatherings, and then had a small beta space that was maybe 100 square meters with about 20 people, which helped us cultivate the right values and the community before we moved on to the actual space. Given how the computer is responding, I'll skip the video, which kind of outlines this journey. But basically it entailed doing countless meetings around with designers, technologists, entrepreneurs across Istanbul and elsewhere. The other important point is, for us, it's been finding the right balance between private, academic and public partnerships in that order. We spent about 1.5 years raising money from private investors who believed in the idea of talented people coming together to tackle challenges of their interest. The academic support came from universities which were in dire need for new exposure to ideas and spaces, and then the public fund came at last from the local and the wider government. And this is making it quite challenging. Well, I think we can do it without slides as well. Okay, last chance. So this is the Beaumont Beer Factory where we're located. It's in the heart of Istanbul, with restaurants, concert hall, art installation venue. It opened about 1.5 years ago, and last year's numbers were quite high, 750,000 visitors for 2016. And the system itself wasn't designed by us. It's actually a consequence of 8 years of planning work of different constituents that believe that this combination would make a difference in Istanbul. And our space looks like this. So we're in the old warehouse section, about 700 square meters, with a co-working space, a maker lab, and an event space. As designers, we spent a considerable time thinking about how we can design for interaction and serendipity. So, and then we will probably also touch on the idea of how to make a community hub both accessible to the public, but also relatively sheltered from the public so that new ideas can emerge. So the division between private and public part was a key point. And also making things extremely flexible meant that we had to design our own furniture on wheels that was very nimble and could shapeshift on a very rapid manner. I'll skip over these, which ended up actually becoming a furniture brand on its own called Canvas, which we debuted in Milan Design Week last year, and now we work with different schools and companies who are after the same culture of flexible work environments. Another big lesson learned is we were very impatient. We've thought that now that we have a great group of people together, they should interact, and they will. It wouldn't be a problem, but it actually takes a ton of energy, and it's more like working with soil, and over 3-4 years these seeds will flourish, rather than our culture of in 3 months, 6 months, let's get this thing done and let's make big projects happen. So these are some of our members. The current numbers are about 130 members. Again, gender ratio we found is a very crucial aspect, because this also becomes a social environment for most people, and to find the delicate balance between different spectra, from very technical, techie to fuzzy, from very introvert to extrovert, we codified these characteristics into our application process, where now to become a member, it's like 1 out of 5 is admitted, but our criteria is less of us being above them, but more of us being the chemists that seek for the right balance of disciplines, characters, and attitudes. We also are very diligent in mapping these networks. We use open source software called Graph Commons to map the community almost on a real-time basis. When someone new joins, they're immediately added, and this is all public data. And then the second thing we map is the map of interactions, and this is how we see the legacy of the space. It's not about the furniture or, you know, even the people in it, but what comes out of it. And over the last 2.5 years, 60 projects emerged just by the fact that people have met in this space, and we catalyze them in different ways and forms. This is one good case study because it actually became a real product out in the market. It started with our own need to design a desk lamp for the space. About 10 members collaborated on different fronts: product design, graphic design, mechatronics, electronics, software engineering, PR, etc. The prototyping process took about a year. We worked with local craftsmen in Istanbul, and then it became a Kickstarter campaign that was funded. 200 units were sold just by the virtue of having a video. We're now manufacturing it and sending it around the world in a few months. And this, from the need to the team, to the documentation, execution, and the amplification of the project, the space was of vital value. And the other big lesson learned is, it seems like there's a lot of hype and buzz in the world of innovation with accelerators and incubation centers. We believe that, especially in an emerging country context, the key issue is not necessarily the key attitude shouldn't be the spray and pray attitude where you say out of 100 projects a few are successful and that's fine. In Turkey is a very low trust environment. People don't trust their partners in business very easily. They don't trust investors. They don't trust their suppliers very easily, and that's a more deep-rooted cultural issue. And we realized if we talk about collaboration, we ought to talk about trust, and to build trust takes a lot of time. So instead of going with the acceleration model, we felt that Atelier should become a decelerator, where we pick the right people, we let them sit and simmer together maybe for a year, 2 years, before anything meaningful emerges. But if anything emerges, it has a much higher likelihood of becoming successful. And what we discovered is we don't see ourselves as entrepreneurs. We think that's all a different world that's perhaps imposed by some values from Silicon Valley. So instead, we see it more as an accidental endeavor where from our own needs and from the needs of our immediate community, we end up building things. And if we keep getting positive feedback, it just starts scaling up and up. Yeah, so if you're interested in other details, atelier.io is the website, and I'm sure over the questions we will discuss some other parts as well.
So, hello? Spare me a second, okay. Can we swap over laptops?
I don't think this has a port.
I think it does.
It does?
Yep. Yes. How? Okay. Hi there. The sound guy, can you help me a bit, please? Can you put all the lights up? Fully up. That's great. Okay. Better. So, hello, I'm Vasilis, and I'm supposed to be an artist. Why is this doing this thing? Okay. Okay, that's me. No, that's not me. But that's my latest project, and it's Moussaka. Do you know Moussaka? Does it? What is Moussaka? Can anyone contribute? Okay, the title of the work How do you title this thing? Oh my God, we are far, far away. You're not helping, guys. Come on. A bit of life. I'm the end and the least. So, Moussaka is the traditional Greek food. Okay, we found it. So yes, that's Moussaka, and that's me. I'm Greek Moussaka. No, yes, I need to explain. I need to explain a bit the story of Moussaka, and to do that, I need to explain Nicolas Tselementes. He was in the early 20th centuries the most known Greek cookery author. You understand what this is, I hope. It took me a while to understand, and then someone, my grandmother, wait, what's happening? I'm fading away, please, don't do that. I will sleep, thank you. So Nicolas Tselementes was really important. Why was that? We have no idea. Because he's the inventor of the Greek moussaka. Yes, the Greek moussaka is not a classical Greek food. It's a scam. It's a fraud. And that's really interesting idea. So normally you would have, from the East, in all the Eastern countries, you would have aubergines, potato, like a mash, like everything all together. And that's a classic, you can find it everywhere actually until today. That's a really interesting dish. And Nicolas Tselementes, he studied in France, I think, and in Switzerland, I think, so that's why I remembered him. And he liked the bechamel cream, which is not Greek, it's a French invention. So he put the aubergines together with the bechamel cream, and he created the famous Greek traditional dish, moussaka. So that's a fraud, that's an absolute fraud. But for me also, Nicolas Tselementes was one of the first and good creative entrepreneurial paradigms. And that's why, because he did a really nice fraud. And that's what it's about the trick. Everything creative is about tricking people or tricking everything around us. So who am I, though? I'm trying to understand. And so you might have figured it out. I'm Greek. So hello, I'm from Greece. And this is Greece. This is, do you know what this is? It's not moussaka. I will help you. It's not moussaka. Okay, I will give you a bigger view. Any idea what this is? Potato. You're getting close. It's the Parthenon. Yes, no, it's Acropolis and the Parthenon. The Parthenon is a part of Acropolis. Yes, Acropolis. So this is Athens. No, this is not Athens. That's a trick. This is Athens. This is the view out from my balcony. So many people have a distorted view about Athens, and that's really important. It's not about ancient Greece, has nothing to do with. You can have here a closer look. And this is a bit a drawing from an Orthodox church next to my place. And this is a creative entrepreneur in the center of Athens. And this is a Roma group selling potato and onions around the center. This is someone in the center, old people actually, they're living all around the center of Athens. This is a municipality worker. These are just playing something. This is a close-up view from an old school department store, the oldest in the city and really decadent. Again, workers in the city. Again, workers in the city. European Union in the city. Actually, this is interesting because this is a bit, I'm cheating right now because this is a bit further down my street and it's closer to the harbor. So one will understand that it's a bar serving, the ships coming. So it's Europa, all the people will understand and will go for a nice strip show. Great. Okay, this is job opportunity. You can read it. A great job opportunity around my block. This is a Pakistani grocery shop. These are some immigrants gathering outside our incubator. I will talk to you about it later on. This is a young Chinese girl playing outside an informal school. Right now, most of immigrants don't have formal school in Greece, so they make informal churches and informal schools. The beardy man in the middle, it's me. And this is our place, our incubator before the renovation, Romanzo. I will talk to you again later about this. This is one of the great workers helping renovate the place. Again, another view from our building. And the beardy man in the middle again, it's me, inside the building. And so, who am I? Yes, okay. I haven't told you yet who am I. I told you I'm from Greece. I showed you Athens. Now I have to explain. Yes. So some 20 years ago, I created Bios Design. I'm a designer then. I'm a graphic designer. I studied abroad in the UK a tiny bit. I failed, but I became a designer even though I failed in my studies. And I've been producing mostly posters and artwork for mostly concerts and everything. I will show you some bits of some of my designs. Mostly are art related and music related. I like the arts, as you can tell. Yes, so by saying that, that's like 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, so around 2000, I was a young enthusiast still. I was a graphic designer, as I showed you, and I wanted to do something for my peers and for Athens. So I created a festival with my friends called Bios. And Bios was the first new media arts festival in Athens, Greece. And yes. So we created the festival, really similar to mapping nowadays. I mean, it had the same theme. It was stealing ideas from Sonar and other kind of Central European festivals. So the format is fairly known to you, so I won't be really extensive. What we did though, because we are Greek also and we like the part of the history, is that every time we were trying to bring in culture, so we're doing like events like music, new and exciting electronic music, new media artists, new interactive projection, computational stuff and so on. But we're doing something like a legacy exhibition. That was a really nice thing. This one was the history of electronic music through record sleeves. So we started from the white label and ended up to today. So it was like a conceptual thing. You can see some aspects. The exhibition was done inside an abandoned warehouse. And some bits here from the concert. And then we did the second edition. And the theme again in the legacy bit was about video games. So we established a video game collection. And we have an informal video game museum right now. So we did this video games exhibition, again, trying to understand what we was all about together with other kind of acts. Here is an act with Auszusendene Bauden's FM Einheit and Pansonic. I'm just showing that because Pansonic, Mika Vanya just died, so it was one of my favorite Finnish electronic musicians. So these are aspects from the festival. So we did the festival. The festival had a similar motto to Sonar, so 3 days and night of electronic music, new media arts, and so on, and all these exciting things. But then that was 3 days and nights just, and the year has 365, I think, still. Yes, I think it's 365. So that wasn't enough. It wouldn't work in the city, and we wouldn't do anything apart of entertaining some people, and that was a problem. So we decided to go on and make like a permanent place for what would interest us. So we created Bios, this is Bios. That's our first building. So around 2003 we created Bios, and our formal title was Center for Today's Art and the Cross Media. So again, similar theme to Mapping Festival and content. We would do like new media and interaction and multi-touch and we so on, all those exciting new media stuff. And okay, this is the structure of the place. It's a big place. It's like around 1,200 square meter. Some views so you can have an idea. This is a performance art from a performance art festival. This is Joseph Beuys tribute. This is Marianne Hobbs. This, I don't know, it's a concert inside the venue. People inside the venue in a concert situation, and so on. So we run this Bios Art Center. We're still running it, actually, for the last almost 20 years. But somewhere midways, we realized that that wasn't relevant today. And why this wasn't relevant? Because when you stop and think, whatever you're doing it for the city, for the place you live on, and for your peers. So you're trying to understand who are your peers, who are the people next to you, who are you, who are you all? I have no idea, I would love to learn. So we realized that the city didn't have to do with new media arts, and anyway it was becoming really boring because everyone nowadays has an iPhone or something like it and a touchscreen and whatever, so they live inside computational world. So that wasn't challenging, and we felt that we have to transform into something more tangible and return to human and us. So we decided to make Bios Romanzo. Romanzo was an old magazine, so we took the building of Romanzo. It was located in the worst area in Athens, Greece, and we are always, sometimes even the state brings us a really nice example of gentrification. That's really cool. I love that. I hate that. So yes, but I'm sorry. This is the place. So this place is split between a cultural center and a creative arts incubator. And yes, that's a place. Okay, and these are some pictures from the place, from people working inside the place. Yep. And people being inside the place. So we started only with the idea of doing something again for people working and giving the right environment and the right stimulants for creative people. But we realized that this is an introvert kind of process. So we brought in whatever we knew best, and that was culture, and we combined. And that's our combined model of working. And also we needed money. We are not funded at all. We are one of the few institutes around, at least of the ones I know, that are not funded. We are not state funded. So we find the money out of the bar, or our investment, for example, for the building. We stalled, and to complete all the renovation, we stopped paying the government for 2 years. And that was a creative way to get an informal loan out of the government. So why am I saying this, though? I need to explain. Because if you have a vision and you want to do something, you have to think about it. You have to think if it's relevant to your world, to your peers, to your environment, to your people, to your values. Stop and think every time why you do it. Why do you really want to do it? And then there's no restriction. I mean, you can do whatever you like. You don't need money, or you can invent money. I call this creative accounting. We always use creative accounting in our methodology because we are not rich people. So we're trying to find, money from resources that one wouldn't think of. And yes, that's a place. So I told you about the place. This is a yoga session. This is really successful. This is a street art exhibition, a concert inside the venue, a computational architecture example. It was like a semi-permanent setup on our rooftop. Yes, the event here, another concert, a TEDx type of event. We did some other kind of events like a basketball court on our terrace. This is really successful. We love this project. And then we started expanding around the neighborhood. So we're doing right now a pop-up neighborhood project. We're popping up the whole neighborhood. The problem with the neighborhood was that it was completely forgotten. It was like the worst sector in Greece. And so we thought of reminding the name of the area first, and then slowly doing things outside. Here's a lecture. Here is the place with people during events. So usually also the street is full of people, so it's changing completely the profile of the area. But I didn't bring the right pictures for this, what I wanted to tell you. But after all this activation, we had again a change. We realized that we are around an immigrants area. So we thought, okay, they're part of us. How do we act? And then we changed all the activity of the cultural center, and today we work also as a social center. Social centers as a format don't exist in Greece. So a part of all these hipstery kind of events that we're doing and we love to do, we're doing also other kinds of events that are more real and more tangible in terms of real life. So we host all the immigrants events, like religious events, all the pitching for new businesses, and I mean local businesses, like money exchange for them to send back money to Pakistan, for example. Or we're doing a lot of facilitating for refugees applicants for visas, because the Greek state, but also European Union, makes it really hard, and the process is really complicated. Just to make you understand, when Syrians arrive to Greece, normally they would need to do a Skype call with the right people to get an appointment to go and see someone to apply for something like a visa. So you can imagine how easy it is for them to get a Skype call. They don't even usually speak English. So we are trying to facilitate that lately. We have held around 2,000 immigrants applying for visas. They don't get it all, but that's not our bit to do. And that's how we function today. And of course, parallel to that, we're doing a lot of activity regarding new media arts and creativity and design. And we're trying to melt all those aspects together. And that's one thing that we're trying to do lately. So for example, we have in our ecosystem a photographer who's been doing fake offices for immigrants. So he's setting up in our building a fake office, and all the immigrants come and take a successful living photo shoot inside our building to send over to their families. That's something that usually immigrants pay for. I mean, that's a service that it's happening all over Europe. They need to, because they're struggling here in Europe, but they need to show back home that they're really successful. So we are setting up fake offices, and we photo shoot them to prove they're successful living here in Greece and in Europe in general. That's one project we're doing. I've been trying to fast forward everything. I hope I didn't confuse you too much, because I think that is all. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, both of you. Really thoughtful and insightful stories. It strikes me that both of you and lots of other hubs that we work with are constantly trying to operate on a very fine balance. You're interacting and talking to a whole range of different kinds of partners and collaborators, some of which speak very different languages or have very different cultures. You have both become the kind of pin-up spaces of your countries, the kind of leading creative hubs. But that can also be challenging in terms of trying to maintain an authenticity and integrity, perhaps in terms of your original purpose, particularly when you're trying to speak to all these different kinds of players, from government to local community groups. So how do you balance that? How do you maintain that authenticity and also not go crazy from having to shift attention and language so often?
That's a great question. I don't think there's an easy answer to it. I think two principles that we set out from the beginning is that we will try to not grow in size, but try to grow in impact. And that was an important aspect of how we approached every decision. How can we be how can we work like acupuncture? How can we work like the trim tap of Buckminster Fuller? Like least input, maximum output. Because the least input part makes you also smaller in your size, be it space, be it number of people in your physical space, or just like your digital footprint, like Facebook likes. Those numbers don't have to be very big. In fact, you might be better off politically if you remain unnoticed. But the stuff that comes out, if it also remains as anonymous as possible, that, okay, it came from Atelier, but it's not of Atelier. It just has happened within somehow. A certain magical touch is necessary in people, in how people ought to perceive you, we believe. You know, there has to be a bit of a black box so that it protects the mechanics inside. Because through that black box, you can deflect some requests that come to you that might not be aligned with your ethical values, such as, you know, a company that you would be fundamentally against in terms of their industry. We don't obviously go and tell them when they request to rent, we don't believe in your mission. We just happen to say we're fully booked. And that's, you know, that softness in communication allows for then Trojan horses to emerge. You know, we talked before the meetup as well, like Trojan horse is an Anatolian idea, and I think that's interesting. How do you come up with ideas that are seeded and then can become subversive in another entity, but you don't tell them your real mission? We might there might be a bank who is renting the space, and at first sight that might, on a superficial level, that might not seem aligned. But if those 10 people within that bank are seeded with a certain philosophy, and then they go back and start transforming things, that's better than turning your back. Because if you're in the system, you accept the rules of the game, and then you try to stick to your values. The other version cannot exist in cities, we believe. If you might be in this rural eco-village, completely closed-loop, self-sustaining, absolute fascinating. Yeah, it's an amazing path to follow. But if you're in the city, you're in the game.
Wow, that's really interesting, because I have the exact opposite thoughts. Well, to begin with Trojan horses. I mean, the Trojan horse original outside the Troya, how you could pronounce it in English, I don't know. It was massive, because it had to be visible and important to bring it inside. So you need to have a massive idea. And okay, we are trying the exact opposite. We are trying to make us look the biggest and be the biggest possible, and make the loudest noisy we can, and grow and maximize our growth, actually. And we consider ourselves as part of the system, and not like keeping our values or anything. We're just part of the system. And that's really important, because then you don't have like fake ideas of what you serve and how you serve it, because I don't think you can exist outside the system until at least nowadays. So yes, that's how we usually operate. We're trying to maximize everything, be the biggest possible, grow the biggest we can, be as noisy with the biggest people and the biggest Facebook groups. So the exact opposite of what you described. And of course, this quantitative approach brings qualitative also values, but also brings and other things. For example, when we started the first venue, we had really concrete ideas of what we wanted to put up, what kind of aesthetics. And then when we did our second venue, a nice way to understand what we would do in terms of artistic production, or what we would host, is we would do it. Would we do it actually back then in our previous? And if the answer would be no, we would never do that, then we would say, okay, that's a good thing to do right now. So, for example, we're doing in our new venue yoga session. I hate yoga. I mean, I'm completely against all yoga aesthetics. It's one of the That's a personal thing, I'm sorry. But that's one of the most successful things we've been doing lately, and that's also that makes us look really hipstery and really cool around the city. So why not? I mean, you can give a try to anything. I mean, and just keep whatever works for you every time. And yes, multiplying.
So very good at, yeah, a bit slippery. I'm going to ask the audience if they have any questions in a moment, but just one more question, if that's okay. I just want to explore this tension that you pointed to very cleverly. You know, there's obviously a huge amount of other innovation happening in the city. People doing much more kind of traditional business, selling things, fixing things, repairing things, designing things that isn't necessarily termed as creative entrepreneurship, or isn't badged, you know, by policymakers or funders or anything else. And certainly in the work that we do, we always feel that tension very acutely and are aware as an institution that when we support something, we're sort of, you know, can become part of that problem. So how do you make sure that you're not creating more inequality in a city between those who get to be part of that innovation process formally and those who are doing very innovative things but aren't necessarily being recognised as such? Do you think you have a role in that, or do you feel that's beyond your you know, interests or pay grade?
Well, okay, that's again an interesting question. And an interesting approach. I mean, you know, the city has existed as we know it right now from when alternative power was invented. I mean, that's why we have cities, because we have factories producing electricity outside the city, and this is producing the city format that we know nowadays, and people have been functioning inside cities the same way over and over again. I don't think there's any kind of change. I mean, I know that usually because we have to talk about it and talking about creativity and creative entrepreneurs and also on, and all those great values and ideas, but all those neoliberal ideas actually, I mean, they're kind of a risky thing even to give to people and to everything they do those kind of titles. When I go to the airport, I was talking with a taxi driver. He's using a really successful startup from Greece, and the cab that took me from Athens Center to Athens Airport to get here, and which is called TaxiBit. It's now getting universal. It's the biggest and most successful startup from Greece, and he was really proud about it. He was #1 in comments, really successful. And that made me think, I mean, was he really successful? I mean, because actually he became more into his job, but he's becoming more with less privileges than he used to have before. This new way of putting creativity inside the basket and everything. I mean, so, and then I told him, that's great. I mean, you're ranking good, but then you're a slave of this accepting and then being so polite and over-smiling. I went to Texas recently, to South by Southwest, and there they're using Ride, a similar application. It's amazing what they do to get a good comment. They give us lollipops, they tell us their family story, they smile all the time. They do crazy things just to get good comments, to get really good ranking. I mean, and you say, what the fuck is happening? I mean, the world is collapsing and individualism is collapsing because of all this kind of connected world, and we have to really think about it. I mean, and we live in precarious times also. I mean, that's another thing. What's happening? How are we going to survive? This proud cab driver that's going, and of course he's struggling to live, and he's using a new application, and in the next 6 years he's going to be obsolete because driverless cars are coming, so he's going to be out of business, and he has no idea about it. Even though in Greece we had the first pilot project of European Union driverless transport. So it's really strange. I mean, what's happening around us, and it really worries me. I mean, even seeing things like this, I don't. I mean, I don't know if we are inclusive. We're not. Or maybe we're totally inclusive because we don't see things this way. We don't judge people. We try just to do what we know to do. We try to design and see, and we're exploring our city and see what's happening and next to us. And it's really cool. I mean, the day before, so 2 days ago, I had a local cheese pie maker around the area approaching us. Said, "I'm celebrating our 45 years. What could I do? I mean, how can I want to do something and communicate something through the neighborhood and maybe give away cheese pies. I don't know how to handle this." I was really, really happy to have this guy approaching us about this. I mean, that's a great project for us. I mean, the biggest project we ever had. I mean, half price cheese pies for everyone around Athens center. Great. I mean, that's the only thing, you know. So it's not about inclusion, though. I mean, that's a really political correct word. I think that we have to think about real life and everyday life and individuals in general, and not also labeling people through their work. Why do we have to work anyway? I mean, I'm wondering about this one. I mean, we don't have to, so that's another issue. I mean, we're just human after all. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I agree. Well, on the inclusion part, I think inclusion is a very difficult thing to achieve on a genuine level. And we also did not structure our organization to be inclusive from day one. We chose, based on our values, that Turkey is a very peculiar place because in some ways it is on par with, even the language is problematic when I say Western standards, because what is West and where are the boundaries? But there are certain things that are on par in terms of schools, in terms of quality of cultural spectrum that you can interface with in Istanbul and other places, in terms of resources, in terms of industrial capacity. But on the other hand, the inequality runs very deep. You know, the Syrian refugees sit around 500,000 right now, and even before them, most of the population wasn't in great shape. But I think on a root cause level, there is a deep insecurity that leads to people looking westward for every solution. You know, that might be a product solution, that might be a process solution, that might be an organizational solution, but we rarely seek to find values and structures within ourselves. So when we set out, we said, me and my co-founder Kerem had spent 10 years abroad, so obviously we were neither local nor from elsewhere. And we said, how can we reappropriate what we have experienced in the US and other places to the Turkish context? We don't want to copy and paste, we want to see what can take root. And what we discovered is creating scarcity was the way. And that's why remaining slow, remaining small, creating scarcity, we felt that that could be a bit more under control and that could help us test some things easier. And therefore we said 150 is Dunbar's number of manageable communities. 750 square meters turns out to be the right size for 150 members at max, with an event space of 150 people for in a given event. So we were quite scientific about this experiment. And what resulted was we realized that rather than scaling and making other spaces happen, because we were thinking about the theory, we could help others go in their own journeys. So right now we're helping a small municipality in the Thrace region with 150,000 people. The governor came and said, I want to do a design and innovation year in 2018. And that's like a red herring type of thing. It's very unusual that he has no incentive or no direct reason to do it, but he's just saying, I want to do something else. I want to do something unique. So his question is, how can we make sure that each citizen in this population understands something relatively sophisticated when they hear design and innovation? That's a brilliant system design challenge. So then because our system is small, we can deflect some attention from it and work with it, and that becomes a very inclusive project. And in the meantime, the relatively curated community becomes amazing deliverers of that project. Because if we had to be very inclusive, we would have compromised on quality, then we couldn't have delivered when we needed inclusion. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions in the audience that they'd like to ask? You've talked a lot. No? Okay. Do you want to say anything else, guys?
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, we have a question.
What is innovation for you, and how do you measure innovation? Especially, it's a question for all of you, but especially for you. You coming from the British Council, the creative economy, and you work internationally everywhere. So, how do you define that, and where is it, and how do you measure that when you need to think about who do you want to support, who do you want to work with, and so on?
Okay, did everyone hear that? Do I need to repeat the question? No, I think we got it. So the thorny question of what innovation is. I mean, I think for me, innovation is just about making something new happen, but it might be an old idea in a new context. I mean, anyway, I don't think we should go into a debate about what innovation is. But in terms of how we support different things, there are some critical guidelines that we have, but some of it is quite fluid, and it's a lot about our networks, and not just mine, but obviously, but our local teams and the people that we work with in different places, because you can have a very clever metric, but it depends on the local context so much, and so many other factors, that you need to have that kind of nuance and contextual approach. We may have different thematics or different drivers at different times. We are partly funded by the government, so sometimes there are kind of directions that we have to go in. But largely we are at arm's length from government, and try to be independent and support the new ideas with unlikely people as possible. And when I started, for example, the work on hubs, it's not something the British Council had ever thought about before, and it's still quite difficult for some of my colleagues who work in the more traditional arts sector, who are used to working with established museums and galleries, to get their head round. And also, I think generally we're seeing in the arts and cultural sector just this shift of understanding, going from just individual artists and their sort of excellence to more networked, collaborative work. So I think, what I have tried to do with my teams around the world is, it may not seem particularly radical, but for an older organisation, it is not always easy to get support internally. So that's probably a longer conversation, but I guess just trying different things, and if they go wrong, then that's okay. That's also innovation, I guess.
Okay, I don't believe in innovation. I think that we talked briefly about it again. It feels like it's like a vintage term so it sounds like a 70s idea. Anything exciting goes, anything unexpected goes. And usually when you have something that has something that doesn't match, or when you have things that don't go together, that's when we really like it, and then when we give it a try, and that's how we verify if it's something that we would go for and try and see if it works. And that's it. Yeah. There's no innovation.
I think the word itself is also becoming problematic, like many other words that actually have good intentions, design, sustainability, etc. But fundamentally, it's doing something new can be both on the process or the product. So if it's the process, maybe you're engaging the stakeholders in such a way so that when they leave the room, they leave with an asset that might transform the way they think. So on a derivative way, that might be why creative hubs are important, not because of the products they do, but because of the derivative impacts that they may have. And on the product side, there's a lot of critique of the maker culture, that it's a very masculine idea, because the idea of making has always been counterbalanced with the idea of maintaining things, with educating, with caring. And we also think that if you're just after making new things without understanding the externalities, the consequences, and everyone else that needs to take care of it once you've made it, then you're not thinking hard enough. It's on a systemic level, I think our problem is not that we innovate enough, that in fact it's the opposite, that we end up innovating too much, that they become liabilities. All these things can turn against us, and that's not to say that we should just stop and see what's around us and like not think new things, but unfortunately the culture is very impatient, and we just keep glorifying whatever is new, even if it's just a package with nothing in it.
I think we had another question behind this gentleman with the glasses.
Just a very quick one, quick answer, because I'm sure everyone wants a drink. I think it's a great a comparison between two ecosystems. I mean, just in a quick answer, what's happening next in the Greek direction? Are you doing anything in any different directions? We're just carrying on the same way?
And you think this question is fast? Okay, so I have another 100 slides. Wait. No, I have no idea. I mean, yes, I have no idea is the answer. We don't know where it's going. We're trying to do something on a bigger scale, as I already tried to describe. So we're doing a pop-up neighborhood. So we're trying to function a whole neighborhood with, right now we have registered 78 different venues, and we're trying to kickstart all of them together at the same time. And that's kind of crazy. That's what we're working right now on. And yeah, that's it. I mean, I have no idea. Right now we are trying also to be recognized as the ones doing it. I mean, as the doers in the city. And we have municipality elections in 2 years' time. So that's a lot of time to reflect. Maybe we run also for the municipality. That's another plan. And then general elections, I think it's, if everything goes smoothly, in around 5 years' time. So maybe we run for government, which is our next plan. And then I know that it's going to be, again, the presidency of Greece in the European Commission. So we hope to run that section. And if we make it, then is this G12 project that we really like, and we like their agenda, so maybe we go on with that and see how it goes.
Can I ask one quick question? It's actually in relationship to Britain, because I'm also from the UK. Do either of you have any, in the setting up of this and in the longer term plans, do you have any plans or pressure, or is it essential to bridge now from the outputs that you do have into more bigger business and corporate sector, which is the pressure that is quite strong in the UK?
From the onset, we have set clear guidelines for ourselves on the rules of engagement, and when a corporate partner approaches us for a number of things, we share that guidebook and say, this is how you can engage with us. The event space is open to rent only if it's about knowledge production, and it's only up to 5 days a month, so that we keep a balance. If they want consulting, we need to be there on day one when they make the strategic plans with the highest level executives. And we need to sit with the decision makers, not the middlemen. And we need to say that if this is going to succeed, you need to keep us engaged throughout. You can't just drop us midway. And we've learned this over the 3-4 years, and we're still learning a ton. what we also discovered is Turkey is a great playground and learning ground because everything happens really fast. We've built architectural projects in 8 months from thinking to end of construction. We've designed and manufactured products in 4 months. That pace is amazing, but the stakeholders you work with are not necessarily the best. So it's a great place to learn, and when we learn and as we learn, our intention is to keep the same hub, to keep the same people, the same process, but work internationally. We started working with New Lab, who are also our partners in Brooklyn, about a citywide sensor-based project that's not about smart cities, but sensitive cities, we call it. And that might go in interesting directions. And there we work with Autodesk, Intel, and other stakeholders. We're in the dialogue of it, at least. And that's exciting for us because if you use those funds in the right way, and most of them that come especially from marketing budgets are wasted in very projects of no result, that it just gives you leverage. So fundamentally we're not opposed to working with capital as long as we have reasonable control over it.
From the Greek side?
Okay, so what was the question again? It's about funding and approach.
It's about the bridge, which is pretty
yeah.
much expected in the UK from creative hubs into businesses and corporate sector to enable corporate innovation, actually, and the issue of creative assets and the protection of creative assets.
Okay, yes, cool. So today we're hosting 106 creative businesses in our hub, and we are running a creative embassy, that's how we call it, and we liaise them together, and we do we pitch for projects for bigger companies. That's how we function in terms of how we work with bigger companies. We don't interact with them directly. I mean, we are the bridge actually for our creatives, and that's how we function. Right now we're starting a microfinancing program, so we are trying to do microfunding and microfinancing for the companies hosted inside our premises, and not only for them. And we're doing also some kind of smart corporate programs that are kind of training or mentoring or creative approach kind of programs for bigger Greek businesses, but that's to make money, to be sustainable, I mean, to be honest. And we've been trying also to collaborate. We were recently approached by the National Bank of Greece, it's the biggest Greek bank, and they asked us to work on a common project, but we don't have the same language. I mean, so we didn't manage to communicate, so we failed. But we hope that we'll get reapproached in the future and exploit them the best we can, because that's how it feels for us in terms of banks and how we work with them. And what else? Yes, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, yeah. But that's an interesting bit, though, in terms of the social side again. And because that's for me a really important aspect, because we come from the cultural sector and not the creative. And I know it's merged right now in terms of European Union, but anyway. So I remember when we started, because we were like an alternative kind of new media arts center, we had a lot of problems with the anarchist groups in Greece, because they thought that all those new emerging arts were alternative arts and alternative things in general, and we were acting as the bridge between alternative and formal, and so even some groups tried to burn our place down just in the beginning, because those bridges must fall. And that's an interesting approach. I mean, it wasn't a good thing for us. I mean, it was really, at the time, was a really difficult situation to handle. But it's a really skeptical thing, I mean, about bridges and what's their role and what's our role and our social role, again, in all this kind of thing.
No, I just think probably the key to it is that we all get on top of what creative assets are and actually protect from the base through. So what value and values are, and the coming together of those two areas of value and values that can happen, but actually how we enable that route, yeah.
Great, thank you. It's a great question, maybe one we carry on talking about over drinks. Thank you so much for being such wonderful and different speakers, and for being so honest. And thanks to all of you for staying with us, and let's carry on talking. Thank you all.